I trusted my father, but as I got older, I began to wonder how his explanation accounted for Chuck Norris, Terminator, and Rambo, who arrived at the Wimby Trading Center one summer and caused all kinds of ruckus. These men appeared in action movies that played in the local video show, which was really just a mud hut with benches, a television, and a VCR. At night, wonderful and mysterious things happened there. But since I wasn't allowed out after dark, I never saw any of them. Instead, I had to hear stories the next morning from friends whose parents weren't so strict. Last night I watched the best of all movies, said my friend Peter. Rambo jumped from the top of the mountain and was still firing his gun when he landed at the bottom. Everyone in front of him died, and the entire mountain exploded. He pretended to clutch a machine gun and fire in all directions. When will they start showing these films during the day? I said. I never get to see anything. The night the Terminator came to the video show, it was simply shocking. When Peter found me the next morning, he was still in a state. William, I just don't understand this movie. This man was shot left, right, and center, and yet he still managed to live. I'm telling you, this Terminator must be the greatest wizard ever. It sounded fantastic. Do you think the Americans have such magic? I asked. I don't believe it. This is what I saw, Peter said. I'm telling you, it's true. Although years would pass before I saw any of these films, they began influencing our games at home. One was a shooting game that I played with my cousin Jeffrey, using toy guns we made from a polony bush. Finding a straight branch, we removed its core, like taking out the insides of a ballpoint pen, and used it as a ramrod to fire paper spitballs. I was the captain of one team, and Jeffrey was the captain of the other. Along with our cousins, we formed squads and hunted one another between the houses in our village. You go left and I'll go right, I instructed my soldiers one afternoon, then crawled on hands and knees through the red dirt. My poor mother was constantly scrubbing our clothes. Right away I spotted Jeffrey's trousers from around the corner of the house. Slowly, without spooking the chickens, I snuck up behind for an easy ambush. Tonga, I shouted, then jammed in the ramrod, sending a shower of slime into his face. He clutched his heart and fell to the ground. Mayoin, he gasped, you got me. We were a solid gang of 3, me, Jeffrey, and our friend Gilbert. Gilbert's father was the chief of our whole Wimby district, a man whom everyone called Chief Wimby, even though his real name was Albert. When Jeffrey and I got bored with playing our games in the courtyard, we often headed to Gilbert's. Let's see how many chickens we can count, I said, taking off down the path. Going over to Gilbert's house was always fun, since the chief's work was never finished. As usual, we found a long line of truck drivers, farmers, traders, and market women, all waiting to voice their concerns. As we suspected, many of them carried a chicken under their arm, a gift for their chief. I counted 10, Jeffrey whispered. Yeah, I said, must be lots of problems today. The chief's messenger and bodyguard, Mr. Nguata, stood at the door in his short pants and army boots, dressed as a police officer. It was Mr. Nguata's job to protect the chief and filter all his visitors. He was also the chicken collector. Come, come, he said, and motioned us inside. The chief sat on the sofa in the living room, dressed in a crisp shirt and nice trousers. Chiefs usually dressed like business people, never in feathers and animal skins. That's in the movies. Another thing about Chief Wimby was that he loved his cat, which was black and white, but had no name. In Malawi, only dogs are given names. I don't know why. We found Gilbert in his room, singing to the radio. Gilbert had the most beautiful voice and dreamed of becoming a famous singer. My voice sounded like one of the guinea fowl that screeched in our trees as it pooped, but I never let that stop me from singing. Gilbert, Bo, Bo, Sharp, Sharp. That was our slang we used every time we saw one another. The word beau was short for bonjour, started by some chaps who were learning French in school and wanting to show off. It means hello in that language. I don't know where sharp came from, but it was like saying, are you cool? If we were feeling really good, we went a bit further. Sure? Sure. Fit? Fit. Let's go to the trading center, I said. I bet there's a mountain of treasure outside Ofesi. Ofesi Boozing Center was the local bar in Wimby. Its most popular drink was Shake Shake, a kind of beer made from corn that was sold in cardboard cartons. I wasn't allowed inside Ofesi, but I'm guessing they didn't have a garbage can because every night the men tossed their empty cartons into the road. Gilbert, Jeffrey, and I liked to collect them. After we washed the cartons out with water, they made the perfect toy trucks. Even though we lived in a small village in Africa, we did many of the same things kids do all over the world. We just used different materials. After talking with friends I met in America, I know this is true. Children everywhere have similar ways of playing with one another. And if you look at it this way, the world isn't such a big place. My friends and I loved trucks. It didn't matter what kind. We loved the 4-ton dump trucks that rumbled out of the big farms, kicking up dust. We loved the small pickups that took passengers from Wimby to Kasungu, the nearest city. We loved them all. And each week we'd compete to see who could build the best one. I know that in America you can buy toy trucks already assembled in a store. In Malawi we built ours from Shake Shake cartons and pieces of wire. To us, they were just as beautiful. The axles were sections of wire we bought by picking mangoes. And for the wheels, we used bottle caps. Even better were the plastic caps from our mother's containers of cooking oil, which lasted much longer. And if we took our father's razor blades, we could cut designs in the wheels to give each truck its own unique treading. That way, the tracks in the dirt told us if the truck belonged to Kwamba Toyota, for instance, or to Gilbert Company, Ltd. We also built our own monster wagons, called chigiri, that looked like American go-karts. We made the frames from thick tree branches, careful to find ones with giant knots, or a fork that could be used as a seat. We then dug up large tuber roots called kwambu that looked like mutant sweet potatoes, and shaped them into wheels. The axles were poles carved from a blue gum tree. After everything was assembled, we tied it all together with vines and hoped it didn't fall apart. To make the car move, one person pulled with a long rope, while the driver steered with his feet. With 2 cars side by side, we held derbies through the trading center. Let's race, for sure. Last one to reach the barber shop will go blind. Go! After the race, if we had some money in our pockets, we'd stop by Mr. Banda's shop for a cold bottle of Fanta and some dandy sweets. Mr. Banda ran the Malawian version of a convenience store. On his shelves were packages of margarine and powdered milk, since most people didn't have refrigerators at home to keep milk cold. He also sold aspirin, cough drops, lotions, bars of Lifebuoy soap, and on the very bottom shelf, Drew's liver salts. I have no idea what liver salts were used for, but I am certain they tasted rotten. Whenever we entered, Mr. Banda greeted us in our usual Malawian custom. Muli Wanji, he said. How are you? Nidri bueno. Kaya inyu, we answered. I'm fine. How about you? Nidri bueno. Sikomo. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. After that, it was more of the same stuff. You boys keeping out of trouble? Yeah. Helping your mother and father at home? Yeah. Well, give them my greetings, for sure. If we were really hungry, we combined our money and headed to the Kanyanya stand, which was like a Malawian fast food restaurant. It was really just a vat of boiling grease over a fire, but the fried goat meat and potatoes they served were heavenly. The man tending the fire would grunt and say, "How much?" And we would answer, 5 kwacha, or however much money we had. 5 kwacha was less than $1 American. The man then turned around and cut a few chunks of meat from a goat hanging from a rail. He dropped the meat into the boiling oil, followed by a handful of sliced potatoes. When everything floated to the top, he served it in a wooden counter, along with a pile of salt for dipping. "Your mother is a good cook," Gilbert told me once, "but not as good as this." Yeah. My parents wanted me home before dark, but that was my favorite time of day anyway. It was when my father and Uncle John, Jeffrey's father, finished their work in the maize fields and came home for supper. In the kitchen, my older sister Annie helped my mother prepare the food. Since we had no electricity, we still cooked everything over a fire. As Annie fed sticks into the flames, my mother stirred a pot of something delicious, letting the smells escape into the courtyard. Since I was a growing boy, it was hard for me to wait, even if I'd just eaten quinina in the training center. With my stomach growling, I'd stand in the doorway begging. "Just a few more minutes," my mother would say. "By the time you wash your hands and face, it will be ready." Usually before supper, my cousins gathered in the courtyard and played soccer. Since we had no money for a real ball, we made our own using plastic shopping bags that we called jumbos, wadded together and tied with rope. They didn't have the same kind of bounce as a real soccer ball, but they still allowed us to play. All across Africa, children used the same jumbo balls. If it was the rainy season when the mangoes were ripe, we filled our pails from the neighbors' trees and ate them for dessert. We bit into the juicy fruit and let the sweet syrup run down our fingers. If there wasn't any moonlight for playing soccer, my father gathered all the children, cousins and all, in the living room, lit a kerosene lamp, and told us folk tales. "Be still and hush up," he would say. "Now, have I told you the story about the leopard and the lion?" "Tell it again, Papa." Sometimes my father forgot the stories and made up new ones as he went along, creating new characters and outrageous endings. And while we loved hearing these tales, the truth was that real life was sometimes difficult to distinguish from fantasy.